So we have a new gate. We are in gate 44 called Coming to Meet, the Gate of Alertness. And this is the first line, which is called Conditions. Whenever you're dealing with the first line, you're dealing with the keynote of introspection. We know that this is the foundation of the hexagram, and this first line is a classic example of what a foundation really means, because it establishes the basic nature of what coming to meet is all about. This is one of the four ways. It's called conditions. And above the lines in the Ravi Ching, it says the success of any interaction is based on the absence of any preconditions. There's a lifetime learning here. It says the establishment of frameworks as the result of interaction. This is what surrender is all about. It has to take place within a specific framework. Here is this transformation that we want to bring about. Here is the framework of how it gets done. And right away, we have a number of things to think about. We have lower trigram, first line. It doesn't know that there's a gate at the other end of the channel. And yet we have a line that says nothing works without interaction. This is the channel of surrender. It's the channel of the transmitter. It's the creative channel of tribal circuitry. That is, it's the creative channel of the ego circuit. The gift inherent in this is to be able to transmit to the tribe and to be rewarded for successful transmission. And the transmission point is the ego. It is the ego through its willpower. It is the ego through its equation of work and rest that has to be manipulated. The 44, through its awareness, must manipulate the ego to a point where it accepts the schedule of work and rest. These are the conditions. There can be some resistance to the word manipulated, but there's no need for that, really. It comes from the Latin word manus, which means hand. It originally referred to the skill of handling objects by hand. So we don't need to have too much word prejudice around this one. It just means handling. The 44 is the personnel manager in the company, and the 26 is the salesman or the saleswoman, and they have a different schedule from the 54 down in the root who works in the factory. And the salesman has to be handled differently. It has to be allowed its ego equation of work and rest, and yet also it must be controlled or manipulated or handled by the 44 to stop it exaggerating or telling lies, because this is something, the 26, it's the gate of the trickster. The salesman, saleswoman who's standing out there on the golf course on their mobile phone, talking to the office and saying, well, I'm stuck in traffic. I'm on my way to a meeting. And that's fine, of course, but the 44, with that smell, that knows what's going on, can smell a rat. And it's the 44's job to say, okay, so when your traffic jam ends at the 18th hole, can you go and visit that client? They're very good at that. It's the story of the 26 who comes into the bar at night and says, I caught a fish this big. And just then the 44 is walking in and the 26 is kind of making it a bit more reasonable, really. A lot of people feel uncomfortable with the 26 and the way that it exaggerates. But when we actually get to the 26, we see the tribe expects to be lied to. They love a bit of showmanship. They love the exaggeration. They're expecting it. And when they're not tricked, actually then they're delighted. In the exaltation, we have a mastery of the collective that can establish restrictive conditions for inferior components and with the ability to enforce them. An alertness to patterns that can lead to mastery of the collective. This is the foundation of this tribal hexagram, and it starts with the mastery of the collective. This is very important to understand. It's one of the four ways to our well-being and our health, to our financial success. Everything in the tribe is about establishing the hierarchy, which has to be established rigidly in the corporate culture. Otherwise, the culture will fail. Even in the most liberal corporate institutions, the hierarchy remains. Doesn't matter whether everybody's dressing in jeans and they're all talking to each other using first names. All organizations are still rooted in hierarchy. And the 44th gate is there not only to recognize who can fulfill the transformation, but also who will honor the hierarchy and be loyal. Never forget, we are rooted in the tribe here. If you're an ego person with the 26 and you read that the 44 can establish restrictive conditions for inferior components, it can piss you off a little bit because you are the inferior element. You're the unaware ego that has to be manipulated by smarty pants splenic. Not many egos are going to like this. The 44 has the ability to enforce the conditions. Well, this gives it a great advantage. It says, if you don't pay attention to my alertness, I'm going to make you sick. It's the splenic center after all. It knows what's healthy. It also knows when the ego is healthy because together they're our immune system. The biological correspondence to the 26th gate is the thymus gland, the gland that designed our immune system in the first place when we were in the womb and helped establish our immune system in the first 3 years of life. It is also the place of T cells. Now, B cells are at the other end in this gate 44. Without these two types of warrior cells, we wouldn't survive any kind of infection that came along. They are the natural born killers of the body. They go and get them and they kick the shit out of them. And together you have a healthy being. The moment the ego surrenders to the instinctive system, it is then guided by that sort of, I'll try and work out how to say this, sorry. It's because the splenic system is this in the moment thing. So the ego bows down to this in the moment instinctive splenic health system. That's when the ego gets to flourish. And in that process, the whole system gets to flourish. But it's not easy to get the ego to surrender to the alert nose of the 44. In the detriment, we have an attractive nature that will interact with inferior forces and will fail to apply restrictions, resulting in a risk to continued harmony. The failure of the instinct out of the need for harmony. There is no success on the material plane unless the hierarchy is properly established. And the moment that there is a failure to apply restrictions is the moment that, well, not the end result, but the harmony is damaged. If you raise a child without any restrictions, it becomes obvious that somehow that is not going to be good. Restrictions are natural, but it depends on what kind of restrictions. It's not about whether they should be there at all or not. It's the conditions in a way, because the hierarchy requires its pattern. It's all based on memory. Now, if you do not really know what the transformation is about, for example, if you do not know as the personnel manager what your product is and what value your product is to the community, you will not be able to choose the right person to present that in terms of the 26 and the ego. So the failure of the instinct out of a need for harmony, it's that I don't want to tell you that I'm the boss because I want us to be friends. This is the other side. The nature of the first line, the nature of conditions, is that it is the root of our material success. It requires that we establish conditions. If we do not establish conditions, we will not have our proper health and we will not have our success on the material plane. Conditions without preconditions. This is a bit of a noodle, isn't it? It's just getting your head around all of this. We have to have conditions, but we have them without preconditions. When you're working at any commercial level, there are two kinds of managers. There are the people managers and the goal-oriented managers. The first line is the people manager. This is the foundation. The 44 is all about being able to handle the other or manipulate the other. And the lower trigram has problems because it doesn't know there's another. It has to learn that. The first line isn't even interested in that. The first line is concerned about what there is to be alert to. That's what the basic program is saying. And in order to be alert to the other, you've got to learn about the other, because you're the one who has to be able to control the other for transmission purposes. When we're starting with the lower trigram, it is involved with its own process. It's really not ready to go across to the other side of the channel. The specialness of this first line is that it is already conscious of the need. It is an awareness gate, after all. It knows about how important it is to work with the right people and find the right people. Even if it doesn't know who they are or how to find them, it has this basic awareness which most of the other first lines don't have. With all this talk of control, it's important to remember that it's not about controlling somebody's entire life. Everything that we read about the 44 keeping its inferior in its place, it's about the power of the ego within this context, keeping that in its place. And that's always necessary. The grounding is coming from gate 24, and the first line is called the sin of omission. It says transformation that requires retrogressive periods before renewal can take place. Nothing sits on its own in the body graph. Transformation is something that the 32 is keeping an eye on. Is this a good time for transformation or not? Have we got the money for transformation? The 44 is waiting for the financial manager to release the funds so that it can commit the process to memory and start working on the ego. The moon is still in gate 48 since 23:51 last night. At 11:19, it moves into gate 57. This is the gate of intuitive clarity, the complex individual gate that is pointing at 3 other harmonic gates and is a key gate in terms of individual survival in the now. It is the gate of the right ear, and it is in the stream of intuition. I was going to say instinct, but instinct is the 44. This is intuition because it's intuitive clarity. And that moves from the 38 to the 20. It goes via the 28 into the 57 and then up. And the 57 has the fear of tomorrow, which again is survival, because it's a fear of not knowing now what I need to do so that I'll be able to survive tomorrow. So in a way, all of these gates really are about the same thing, the survival gates in the splenic center. Next is gate 32, the tribal financial manager, the gate of continuity, of duration, where the only thing that endures is change. And the fear here is of failure to take care of the material resources of the tribe, which could mean that the tribe doesn't do so well. Again, it's that fear of extinction, of not making it to tomorrow. But that also wouldn't be good for you personally, because the tribe then might withdraw their support from you. And then where would you be without the support of the tribe? So that's gate 44 in the first line. Thank you very much for joining me for this one. I will see you for a second line tomorrow. And until then, even, go gently.